Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now then, Chris Grayling was one of the most prominent leaders of the Leave side in the referendum campaign. Theresa May made him Transport Secretary, and he joins me now. Chris Grayling, have you taken the decision about which airport it's going to be?
No, we haven't. That decision will be taken this week. And what people look slightly surprised when I tell them is actually we've got a genuinely difficult decision. There are three very good choices on the table. I've spent the summer visiting all three,
Heathrow,
looking in detail
Gatwick,
at this.
a bit of both, is that?
Heathrow, new runway to the northwest of the airport. Heathrow, an extension to the northern runway to make it effectively double length with a gap in the middle, and Gatwick to build a new runway to the south of the existing airport.
And you genuinely haven't yet made up your mind?
No, genuinely, it's going to be a decision on Tuesday, and it's a difficult one because all three of these are well-crafted proposals, and any one of them could bring benefits to the United Kingdom.
So you take a decision, and then we have a year-long consultation process. What can you possibly know from that that you don't already know?
Well, it's a statutory process. One of the myths that was in circulation this week is that the decision's been delayed by a year. It hasn't. The 2008 Planning Act sets out a very clear process for a project of this kind. It was introduced to address the issue that we had the 10-year inquiry for Heathrow Terminal 5, for example. It doesn't reduce the process to a very short period of time, but it streamlines it. And so what happens? Consultation, parliamentary scrutiny, vote in Parliament, and then the chosen airport can deliver the very detailed planning application.
Start actually building. Is it your view? I mean, most countries our size have a single hub airport that connects to the rest of the world. Is that ultimately, whatever the decision, is that what we need?
Well, that's one alternative on the table. The other side of the argument is that the arrival of new aircraft like the Airbus A350, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, makes it more possible to run point-to-point aviation in a way that wasn't possible in the past at a much lower cost. So there are genuinely competing arguments here.
If you go for Heathrow, you're going to have big party management problems. Boris Johnson has said that he's going to lie down in front of the bulldozers, at which point I assume that you just simply buy a bigger bulldozer.
Look, there'll be challenge and opposition, whatever option we take. The question here is that we have to, in my view, take a decision that's in the interest of our nation. What delivers us the best connectivity, the right approach for the future, at a time when we want to grow international trade links, open up new opportunities for Britain. Of course there will be opposition, of course there will be challenge, whatever we do.
HS2 faces some kind of crisis, and you have backed it absolutely. Can you just rehearse for us by how much the costs have already gone up before a line or an inch of railway has been laid?
Well, the increase in cost has been down to straightforward decisions about amelioration of the route. So, for example, we are now tunnelling quite a long way under the Chilterns to try and protect the environment of that area. That is a cost that we would not have incurred if we just decided to build it above ground in the way that other countries have done. So any escalation in cost is not about a project that's out of control. It's about conscious political decisions to try and find the right balance between a project that we need and an impact on the environment that we want to minimise.
It's gone up from roughly, I think Andrew Adonis originally said it was going to cost the country 30 billion, and it's now around about 50 billion. The Institute of Economic Affairs has suggested it's going to be 80 billion. My real question is this a blank cheque? Is there a limit? Is there a moment when you say, I know it's a big prestige project, I know a lot of egos are at stake here, but this is now too expensive and it cannot cost, and you actually pull the plug?
No, there isn't. I don't recognise the IEA documents, and of course the current figures include a huge amount of contingency and risk planning as well. We are in a position where the bill that will start phase one is nearly through the House of Lords. It's due to complete its passage through the House of Lords around the turn of the year, and we will start construction of the first phase from London to the Midlands in the new year. And so therefore it's not a question of is this a project in the distant future that might get cancelled. This is a project that's about to start. And if we're going to have
a hugely expensive project, Chris Grayling. I mean, in terms of the amount of money, we talk about these great big figures, 50 billion this, 40 billion that. It's the equivalent of 100 new general hospitals for this country. It's the equivalent of more than a dozen new aircraft carriers. It would transform the NHS. It would make the lives of a lot of people on benefits much easier if you chose not to spend it on this railway. And my real question, therefore, is there a moment when it simply becomes too expensive? Is this a decision that has been taken and nothing's going to alter it, or can you alter the decision and step back at this stage?
Well, the important thing to say is the costs aren't rising. and that we are very committed
Can
to
you guarantee
delivering.
that to us? Can you guarantee that if the IEA are right and this ends up costing £80 billion, Christopher Grayling will resign from the government?
Well, by the time we finish the project, I don't imagine I'll still be Transport Secretary in 10 years' time. But the whole point is that if we are going to have a transport system that can deliver for this country for the future, we need more capacity. One of the myths about HS2 is it's about speed. We have a transport system that is...
It's called high speed, that's probably why.
But we have a transport system that is creaking at the seams. Everyone knows it. We need extra capacity on it. If you're going to build extra capacity on the railways, why would you not build a state-of-the-art railway rather than a railway using the technology of yesterday?
You mentioned the word connectivity, but HS2 doesn't even connect to the Eurostar terminal. People are going to have to get out at Euston and walk along the pavement to St Pancras to get to the continent. Are you absolutely convinced that it isn't right to go to Old Oak Common in London and then transfer directly onto the Eurostar route through Crossrail?
Well, that choice will be there, but when people talk about connectivity, you have to remember that connectivity for HS2 is about linking Birmingham and Leeds, Birmingham and Manchester, creating a real additional benefit to the Midlands and the northern economy. So people tend to look at it through a London prism. It's as much about connectivity there as it is between London and the north.
But other people say that so-called HS3 linking the northern cities would actually do much more for the north than making it a bit faster to get between London and Birmingham.
Well, of course, we're developing that for the future. That development work is being done by Transport for the North right now. And at the same time, I have to say, we're spending £350 million on improvements to the rail system in Liverpool. We'll soon be embarking on the electrification of the Transpennine route. So it's not that nothing is happening in the north. What's happening in the north right now is important and will make a difference far sooner than a completely new railway. We need both, in my view.
Let me turn to Brexit, if I may. The big news of the week, I suppose, was the collapse of the trade deal with Canada and the EU. Are you worried about that? Are you looking at this and thinking, this could be much harder than we expected?
Well, obviously, we want the Canadian deal to be done. It's in the interests of everyone on both sides of the Atlantic that happens. But I think there's a very different question with our relationship with the European Union. We are their most important export market. If you look at the issue of Belgium this week, which has been in the heart of the debate over the Canadian deal, we are a huge market for Belgian agriculture. Nobody in continental Europe benefits from a reduction in the ability to trade with the United Kingdom.
Have you got the Walloons on side then for our deal?
Well, we buy a whole load of produce from Walloon farmers, and so therefore it's not going to be in their interest to see tariffs imposed. And this is why I've always been convinced we will have tariff-free trade, we'll have sensible trading arrangements, because it's in both our interests that should happen.
And all the way through the referendum campaign, you and people like you are saying this is going to happen because they are rational free traders. They're going to look at this in a kind of mercantilist, 19th century, rational way. Actually, what we're seeing out of the EU at the moment is that there's a lot of politics involved. This offended egos, there's patriotic, angry Frenchmen and Germans talking about the way we've been behaved, and there is more emotion in this, and therefore it's going to be more troubling perhaps than you expected.
Well, of course, there was always going to be emotion in this. There were always going to be politics, always going to be political statements, always going to be political positioning before the discussions start. But I can tell you, I mean, I've been having regular dealings with counterparts in the European Union, with the Commission, since I took over this job. My experience has been nothing but friendly relations and a desire to work together in the future.
One of the problems clearly ahead, and the Canadian thing shows this, is that if we're not allowed to do proper trade deals until we have dealt with the EU negotiations, then we could face a cliff edge. In other words, we can't do a trade deal with Canada now. Perhaps we ought to be able to do that, since we're leaving anyway, and do trade deals around the rest of the world. Otherwise, we face this cliff edge.
Well, we're already having discussions with other countries about trading arrangements for the future.
Trade deals.
What we can't do, if you take the example of the EU-Canadian trade deal, we can't suddenly insert ourselves in the middle of that while we are members of the European Union. But of course, we can pave the way for the trade deals that will follow. We can have discussions that will lead to those agreements. And that's what we'll do. That's what Liam Fox is doing.
Would you like to see Philip Green stripped of his knighthood?
I think Parliament has expressed a very clear view, but this is a matter now for the Independent Honours Committee. They will undoubtedly have taken note of what's happened, but it is their call as to what we do.
Hilary Benn was saying just now, I don't know if you heard him, that the most important thing is to make it clear that there could be a transitional period between us leaving the EU and everything being tidied up again, because of this fear that we run out of time in 2 years' time and the deals haven't been done and business and industry don't have the certainty they need, and we therefore face a real crisis then. Do you think a transitional arrangement of some kind is sensible?
Look, I think the key point, and it's a difficult argument, so we've been saying very clearly clearly that we cannot give a running commentary on this. And I know people are frustrated. They want to know what's going on. They want to know what's happening.
We're all very frustrated.
But ultimately, surely we want to do what's in the interest of the United Kingdom, and actually laying all your cards on the table at the start of a negotiation. Anyone who's done a negotiation knows that's not sensible. So we'll do the right thing for Britain. We'll inform Parliament as much as we possibly can, but ultimately the national interest has to come first.
Chris Grayling, thanks very much indeed for talking to us.
I've been